they're in the market for bigger names. We're not making things up. And let's start with Dejounte Murray in Atlanta. We know that Knick decision makers, I don't want to say decision makers, some Knick voices with influence see Murray as a really good fit alongside Jalen Brunson. I'm not sure if that has changed after the Anunoby trade. I haven't checked in on it. I don't know that, but I would assume that at the very least, you're going to continue to check in with Atlanta and see where it is. Jake, Dejounte Murray, do you think Atlanta eventually moves him? Do you think it's by the deadline? How do you think things play out in Atlanta? I think a lot of things are in flux there.
A lot of things are definitely in flux with the Hawks. I got my next notebook article coming out tomorrow at Yahoo, so I don't want to say too much and spoil things for the employer, but I am expecting Atlanta to look at pretty much every option on the table that doesn't include Trae Young and Jalen Johnson. They're rising forward, who, if you watch their game against the Thunder last night, the dude looked like a young Blake Griffin. He was unbelievable behind the back, transition plays and, dunking on people and throwing lobs. He's a heck of a talent. So I think from Clint Capella to DeAndre Hunter to Dejounte Murray, all those guys are going to be for the taking to bring it back to the Knicks. It's a curious fit for me. I know that there's going to be plenty of Knicks fans. I'm sure plenty of Knicks Film School listeners. And if you want to download our show, it's Ball Don't Lie from the Yahoo Sports Podcast Network. I think plenty of fans are going to be wanting to point out that lack of playmaking role, that lack of backup point guard. But I think the Knicks are going to give Deuce McBride some time. Malachi Flynn was a first-round pick. He's someone they can give a look at. And like with Dejounte, to me, it's just like a questionable, curious fit, being that the role you would bring him in to be a secondary supplement to Jalen Brunson is what he's doing with Trae Young in Atlanta right now, and it hasn't exactly worked out so successfully. So I know the contract is considered to be pretty good value with his extension that kicked in and as the cap is going up, all that, but I don't know. It doesn't really get my juices so flowing if I'm looking at it from a New York perspective. I'd be curious if Jonathan thinks differently.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought up that contract because I remember when that was signed, I was taken a little bit aback because it seems like anybody who's even remotely in the All-Star conversation, right? Like, let alone a guy who made an All-Star team under the age of 25, like kind of almost averaged a triple-double with San Antonio. He was an all-defensive player when he was younger. The fact that he would accept that kind of raised an eyebrow for me a little bit. And I think what it ultimately gets to with Dejounte, and this is not exclusive to him, I think there's a lot of really, really good players in the league you could say this about. Well, if you're not good enough to be a team's every possession on-ball guy generating the offense, and you're also not an ideal fit off the ball, and like, look, anybody could just go look up the numbers, the on-court numbers with him and Trae Young together, just the general numbers for Atlanta over the last 2 years since they got Murray. It has not worked. I know they had a nice win last night against Oklahoma City, but it's been underwhelming. He's not shooting it great this year. He didn't shoot particularly great last year. I'm not sure the fit is there. I completely agree with what you said, Jake, especially when you look at, Dante DiVincenzo is their starting two now. I think he's fifth, maybe sixth in the league in spot up threes, and he's shooting them at a blistering pace, like 44% on the year, and that's after a tough start. Murray's outside the top 50 in total spot up threes, or catch and shoot threes, excuse me. And his percentage is just kind of ho-hum. So with all due respect to what we have very clearly seen in the first two games of that quickly, which is that their bench is lacking seriously in some playmaking, does that need move the needle enough where you're going to go out and get a Murray for whatever it's going to cost? And obviously you guys would know better than me about that, where, might there be a smaller option or something that doesn't cost quite as much in terms of assets that would make a little bit more sense? Because I'm like you, I don't love the fit with the starting five.